Sometime last year, I posted this video on TikTok about how I pay myself as an entrepreneur. And since then, it's been getting a lot of engagement, a lot of comments, which made me realize maybe this is something that a lot of other entrepreneurs are struggling with. So what I wanted to do is create a longer, more in-depth video showing this exact system and process that I use. That way, maybe it can help you out as well. So the process that I'm using is from this book called Profit First. And in the book, he basically talks about how most entrepreneurs are running their business where they take the money that comes in, they subtract their expenses, everything that they have to pay for, and then they try to pay themselves with whatever is left over, which most of the time is close to nothing. And so they're spending all their time working so hard on their business, but they get basically nothing for it. And instead, he says what we should do is take the money that comes in, subtract what we're going to pay ourselves, and then what's left, we can run our business on. That's what we can use for our expenses. And that's why the book is called Profit First, because it's all about paying ourselves as an entrepreneur as a reward for all of the hard work that we're actually putting in. And then it forces you to focus on how can you run your business in a sustainable way that you have enough money left over to actually run your business and pay those expenses. So one of the first things that I did when it comes to implementing this Profit First method and system is I went to the bank and I set up 5 different accounts. Now, that doesn't mean that I have 5 different accounts that I'm logging in and out of. I just have one account, but when I log into that one account, I can see 5 different checking accounts. Now, in the book, he says that we need to have these different accounts that way we can easily see what our money is allocated for. If you look at most entrepreneurs' bank accounts, they just have one account, right? All the money goes into there. They're paying all their expenses from that one account, and they're trying to pay themselves from that account, which makes it pretty much impossible to see how much money you have to pay yourself, how much money you have for taxes, how much money you have for expenses. Like everything is just in one big pile. And so what basically he says to do in Profit First is you're setting up these 5 different accounts, and these accounts are like buckets. That way you can easily look and see how much money you have to allocate to each different topic. So here are the 5 different accounts that I set up. The first one is for income. Anytime that I get paid from a client, anytime my business makes money, it goes into that income account. The next account that I set up is operating expenses. This is the account that I pay all of my bills with, or any time that I need to make a payment with my business, I'm using the operating expenses account. I have a debit card for my bank, but it is only connected to the operating expenses account because that is the only account that I ever use to make payments. The next account that I set up is owner pay. And this allows me to easily see how much money I have to be able to pay myself on a monthly basis. The next account is profit. Now, profit is cool in a couple of different ways, right? You can put a certain amount of money here every single month, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And then if your expenses are ever going low, you can kind of dip into that profit because you're building it up over time. But also one cool thing that you'll do is every so often, you will pay yourself a certain percentage of that profit, which is kind of like a reward for you owning the business. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. And then finally, the last account that I set up is taxes, which is super, super important because you want to set aside a certain amount of money for taxes. That way, at the end of the year, when you go to pay your taxes, you're not just scrambling to try to find money. You're like, oh, I owe all this money. What am I going to do? You've had it set aside so you're ready and you're pretty much stress free. Now, sometimes when people hear me talk about all these different accounts, all they can think about in their mind is fees. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay fees for all these different accounts. However, if you look for some local banks, and in the book, he even gives you some examples of banks that don't charge a lot of fees. However, a lot of the banks that do charge fees, you just have to have a minimum amount in that account in order to not be charged. But either way, even if you are getting charged, in my opinion, from doing this from 3 or 4 years, it's better to have a small fee for these accounts and be able to easily see how much money that you have and be able to run your business where you're making profit than to not pay fees, have everything super unorganized, you're all over the place, and to not be paying yourself. So really, in my opinion, it's worth having all these different accounts, but if you can figure out a way to do it without having the accounts and still be organized, by all means do it. And please share that in the comments if you find a way to do that. All right, so once I had all of these accounts set up, the next thing that I needed to do is figure out the percentages that I would use to transfer to each individual account. So the way that the flow works is the money goes into the income, and then from there, you're gonna transfer it into the owner pay, into the operating expenses, into the profit, and into the taxes. However, you gotta know what percentage that you're going to transfer. That way you're not just transferring random numbers. And the great thing about this book is that he actually gives gives you those percentages that he suggests you using based on how much money that you're making. And so what I did is I actually created a spreadsheet that I've been using for the past couple of years that all I have to do is plug in the numbers and it does all the work for me. So I'm gonna pull up my screen, that way you can see it, and I'll also give you this spreadsheet, that way you can use it to make everything easy for you as well. All right, so here is the spreadsheet that I've been using over the past like 2, maybe 3 years that helps implementing the system super easy. So I will give you a copy to use. All you have to do is click the link and then come here and go to make a copy. Do not request access to this one because obviously I'm not gonna give it to you, but make a copy, save it in your own Google Drive. So here are the percentages, right? I put an image of this down here. Now, what you have to look at is the amount of money that you're making per year, right? So this is what this number right here is, right? So you're just gonna look at, are you making less than $250,000 per year? You're gonna use this, right? If you're making between 250 to 500, you'll use this. If you're making 500,000 to $1 million, use this, and so on and so forth, right? So then from there, all of these are the same, right? All of your money is gonna go into your income account. So what you need to do is set it up to where all the payments that you're getting go into your income account, like 100% of that money. Now, next is the profit, right? So based on these numbers, this is the percentage that you will use for how much you're gonna put into the profit, right? So let's say most people are here, right? 0 to 250,000, you'll do 5% for profit. And then you'll pay yourself 50%. Now think about how cool this is. Most people are probably operating like here, right? You're probably barely paying yourself anything. However, paying yourself, like doing it this way, you're actually going to get money for working in your business, which is like the cool thing that he has to set up. You're gonna feel good because you're doing all this work and you're actually getting paid. For taxes, you'll do 15%, and then operating expenses, you'll do 30%, right? So you're running your business on 30%, and these numbers change based on these. So just look at how much money you're making and then go down here. Now, you have these different percentages, and I really suggest reading the book. That way you can get a better idea of this. But you have TAP and you have CAP. TAP is your target, I forget what it stands for, but target something percentage. All right, so I just looked it up. It's target allocation percentages and current allocation percentages. So the TAP is your target allocated percentage, which is like how much you're allocating to distribute from each of these. And then CAP is your current. Basically, what you need to know is this is your goal. This is the number that you want to get it to, and that's based on this. And this is where you're at now. So maybe in your business, you can't exactly pay yourself 50% because you're not making a lot. So maybe you have to pay yourself 10%, right? But the goal is you're going to move it up over time, and your goal is to get it to 50. And I think in the book, he says every quarter you can move it up, and the goal is to move it up but never move it back. So after like 3 months, you can move it up. You can move it up a percentage, 5%, 10%, whatever you feel like, but you should never move it back, right? So this is the goal, and I have these right here. So all you need to do for this is you just need to look at whatever this number is, and then you can just replace these, right? And so let's pretend like we're making 0 to 250K, right? For the income, we're gonna do 100%. For the profit, we would do 5%. Let's say we'll put this here. Profit, we'll do 5. For the tax, we would do 15. Owner's pay, we would do 50. So you can just change these. And then operating expenses, we would do 30. So then these numbers right here are automatically figured into this, right? So then you could just change these numbers of whatever the percentage is. So let's just change it to what the goal is, right? And the cool thing is I made this to where it would be red if it's not 100. So you just got to make sure that this properly adds up, right? So let's change these numbers. This is going to be 5. And so now it's 100, right? So what you got to do, and in the book, he suggests that you do this 2 times a month. And I've been doing this pretty much 2 times a month. I really try to stick with it on the 10th of the month and on the 25th of the month. So what you would do is on the 10th of the month, you would log into your bank account and you would look at how much money you have in your income, and you would put that here. So let's say that you made $2,500, right? You made $2,500. and that's what's in the bank account, right? So you put that here, you press enter, and it's going to automatically calculate everything for you, right? And so this number should add up to this number, right? And the reason, if you look right here, I basically subtract $1 from it. That way your income account doesn't close, because I know there's some banks where it's like if you have zero for too long, it'll close the account. So this will avoid that, right? You always have at least a dollar in there. So with this amount of money, if you have $200 or $2,500 in your account, basically this is how much you would need to transfer. So you would go in there and you would transfer $749.70 to your operating expenses. You would transfer this amount to your owner pay, this amount to profit, and this much to tax. And the cool thing is, like, how much would you be paying yourself typically out of this if you're just running your business out of one account like most people, and you don't actually have any structure? But now you're actually getting paid $1,200. So I mean, imagine you have a business and let's just pretend like you're making, $5,000 a month. You'd be getting paid $2,500 to do that, rather than most people paying themselves nothing. And now you got to operate your business on this amount of money. And so some people might say, well, how do I do that? And that's why you have to make this. That's why this system forces you to run your business in a way that's actually going to be sustainable. And it shows you, like, do you have a business model that's actually working? Because if you just create a business where all you have left is just to pay your expenses and you can't ever pay yourself, it's not really a good business. So essentially what you need to do is take a look at this, determine your percentages, put them here. This is your TAP. Put your CAP, which is whatever you can do right now. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly these. And then on the 10th and the 25th of every month, I come in here and I put in the amount of money that I'm making, right? Obviously, if you're making a lot of money, it's going to be more, but let's just say you put that number in here and it's going to automatically calculate like what you should transfer. So you just log into your bank account, transfer this much to operating, this much to owner's pay, this much to profit, and this much to tax. Also, let me talk about this right here, since I didn't touch on it. So what he suggests in the book is you kind of come up with a salary, in a sense of how much money you're going to pay yourself every time that you do this, right? So you want to come up with an amount of money that you're going to pay yourself per month. So let's say per month you want to pay yourself $4,000, right? Bi-weekly, because this is what we're doing on the 10th and the 25th, that would be about $2,000, right? So what happens is, if there's extra, you're going to leave it, right? So let's say right now, right? Let's say you look into your bank account, there's $7,340 in there, and you have this much that you would be giving to your owner's pay. Now, when you go to pay yourself, you're not going to give yourself $3,669.50. You would just give yourself $2,000, right? And the cool thing about that is that allows you to start building up money in that account. That way you start having months ahead, weeks ahead, and you're not always stressing out about not being able to pay yourself. And because you have different bank accounts, you can easily see how much money that you have left, right? So like, if there's extra, you're going to leave it. But if there's not enough, the crazy thing is, he's like, you can't take it. So for example, let's say you made 2,000 in there and you only have 999.50. You can't take this. You have to leave it. And so it really, really forces you to figure out how to create a business that's going to be profitable and sustainable in a way that you can pay yourself. Now, one question that you may have is, how do I actually go about paying myself? So I have all of this set up, I do all the transfers, but how do I actually pay myself? So the account that I have, the bank account that I have that has these 5 different accounts, is a business account. I set this up under my business name. At another bank, but you could use the same bank if you wanted, I have a personal account. And so all I do is I just transfer the money from my business bank account to my personal account. And I'm using that owner's pay account. So the money that's in the owner's pay, I transfer that from my business account into my personal account. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. Right now, I'm a digital nomad. I'm traveling around the world. And so I was able to inside of my personal account connect my business account, and then I can just do a transfer. But when I was in the States, what I would do is I would just order checks, right? I would order checks from my business bank that was connected to the owner's pay. I'd write down however much money it was, and then I would do one of two things. Depending on how much money it was, I would just take a picture of it and do a mobile deposit on my personal account, or I would take that check that I wrote to myself from my business account and I would just go in person to my personal bank and I would just give them that check, and then they would put that money in the account for me. Now, one thing that I have to add that has been very crucial to me being successful with the system is trying my best, and it doesn't always work, but trying my best to only use those accounts for what they're for. It can get very, very, very tempting to want to buy a computer or want to run Facebook ads or want to invest in a course or whatever it is, and you don't have the money, and you see that money for the taxes just sitting there, and you're like, I don't have to pay taxes until 6 months or whatever, so I'll just dip into that. Or hey, I don't have enough money to pay myself, so I'll just take money from operating expenses, or I'll take money from the taxes. And when you start doing that, you're not forcing yourself to build a business that's really gonna be sustainable, and you're not really making the best business decisions. I understand sometimes I've done that, I've taken a risk and it's paid off, but more often than not, I've taken a risk by trading money and moving all this money around, and things really fall apart and I end up being very, very stressed. But when I have discipline and I only use those accounts for what they're for, it has really forced me to come up with creative ways to grow my business in a way that it's using the money that I already have for what it's for, and the money that I don't have, I have to get creative in a way to generate that income. So one thing I really wanted to add is when you set all this up, do your best, and you're probably not always going to do this, but really try your best to only use those accounts for what they're for. All right, so my question for you is, how have you been currently paying yourself as a business owner? Let me know in the comments. Do you have your own way of doing it? Have you been doing profit first or using the way that I'm talking about it? Have you been doing something different? Have you been doing something that has just been a total nightmare? What have you been doing to pay yourself? Let me know in the comments. As always, I hope this video was super valuable. If it was, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. Download that spreadsheet. It'll make your life so much easier. And I also highly recommend going and listening or reading the book Profit First. It's definitely a game changer. And if you have any follow-up questions, just shoot me a message on Instagram. And other than that, I will see you on the next one.